Hi, everybody from SPC. This is Steve Lapkoff, and I want to give you a quick lesson on how to prepare your images for export for image competition. Now, at our club, we have a need of having images submitted at a resolution no larger than 1920 in the horizontal dimension by 1080 in the vertical dimension. As well as selecting 100 dots per inch as the resolution. Now, to do that in Lightroom, which is this particular example, I'm going to give you a workflow of how to do it. So the first thing you want to do is select the images that are of interest that you want to export. You then right-click and you go down to the Export button and you go to Export. Now, you pick hard drive and you tell it where you want to put the images. And I'm going to put my images into the desktop and on a folder called Example Exports. You then work your way down these menus, and we're not going to rename them in this instance, although we could. And I'm going to get down here to JPEG, and we do want JPEG for this export. And you could go anywhere between 80 and 100. 100 is higher quality, 80 is a little bit compressed. And this is the important one here, resize images to fit. And if you put in 1920 by 1080, what's going to happen is, and the image resolution should be set to 100. What will happen is this will export images exactly as you'd like for your image competition submissions, 1920 by 1080. Now, if your image is long and thin, this still works because what it will do is size it so it'll be no wider than 1920 and no higher than 1080. But if the proportions don't fit 1920 by 1080, or in this case it's 16 by 9, it will create the export such that its widest dimension would be in that proportion. So let's do a quick export and I'll show you that. So I'm going to hit export and it'll crank for a second. You'll hear it go bing in a moment. And there are the images. It opened up the example export folder for me. And as you'll see, I have two images and they'll both be of that boat. And I'm going to go just to prove things to you to get info. And what you'll see here in the get info piece is that the images are, in this case, 1440 by 1080. Now it's 1440 by 1080 because the image resolution can only fit in a box 1920 by 1080. And Lightroom is smart because the proportions of the image are only 1440 by 1080. It maximizes to 1080 and goes laterally only to 1440. This would be a submission-ready image, just as is. And it has some metadata. It also tells you when it was shot, things like that. So this is the way to do your image exports. And then you would take this and rename it to whatever it might be. It could be the assigned subject, underscore title, I believe is how it goes, assigned subject. So this would be Long Island sound boat underscore Labkoff. And that would be how I would submit this image for image competition. That would be I believe that's the naming convention, the code, the title, and then the maker. And that's it. That's all there is to it. Now, there's other applications that can do this as well. And I'll do a separate video for how you would do that using Photoshop, and another separate video for how to do it with Adobe Bridge. Thanks for listening. Hi, everyone. This is Steve Lapkoff from the Stanford Photography Club, and I'm going to be giving you a quick tutorial on how to export your images for our image competitions. Our competitions require that you submit your images at 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to make sure every image is set in a 16 by 9 setting. However, it does mean that the maximum height can only be 1080 pixels and the maximum width can be 1920. For this example, I'm going to be using this square image of a hummingbird. And what we're going to do is we're going to right-click on the image, and we're going to shift down here to export to, and we're going to go to custom export. And for the custom export menu, we're going to basically set this up to go to a specific image location. In this case, I'm going to put it on my desktop. I have an image folder called example exports, and that's where I'm going to put it. Next thing I'm going to do is set the image resolution for a JPEG, because we do need JPEGs. I'm going to run it up to maximum. You can set it to whatever you'd like, but I wouldn't recommend it going below 8 on Adobe Bridge. And we're not going to scale the image. We are going to resize it, and we're going to set the image here to width and height, and it's going to be set to fit, so it fits in that box, and we enter the numbers 1920 by 1080, and the resolution here we're going to put in 100. And if you want to add keywords or anything other than that, that's fine. But what you'll do at this point is you'll start the export. And I could have set it up as a custom export and save that for another time, but we have one picture going at the time right now, and that job has just been completed. We have one exported file, and I'll close this menu. And if I go over to my desktop and I go to my desktop and up to example, we will have an image here that I just created today at 2:59 p.m. And if I pop on it, there you have your image. And to prove that it is at the right resolution, if I do a get info on it, you'll see over here in the get info that the image is exactly 1080 by 1080, which is exactly correct. If we made it 1080 by 1920, it might have stretched the image into an oblong shape. But what we really wanted is exactly what it did, which is 1080 by 1080. And the image resolution is set up at 100 dpi. That's all there is to it. Then just rename your image to the name that you want it to be submitting for. Let's say this one was going to be for Color Print Salon, CPS, and we'll call this Hummingbird versus Bee, and then my last name. And that's all you need to do. And now that image is ready for submission using the judge. If there's any questions, send me an email at selphotographer@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Hello, SPCers. This is Steve Lapkoff, and I'm going to be giving you the third and final tutorial on how to resize your images for image competition. In this instance, this image is a long and thin image in landscape mode. And as I've told you before, we need to have our images at 1920 by 1080 at a resolution of 100 dpi for proper submission for image competition. The way this works in Photoshop, as opposed to the other two applications we've already done, which was Lightroom Classic and Bridge, you can set things up very specifically in many different ways. The first way you could do it is to go into image size and change your image size. And you'll notice here I'm at 300 dots per inch, and I'm at 36 inches by 10 inches, which is roughly 1:3. And I say roughly because it's probably off to some degree. But what you could do here is you could change this down to 100, and that changes the resolution. And as I bring that down, and then we want to have this pixel set, so I can bring this down to 1920. Notice that when I go to 1920, the resolution changes automatically on the height to 549. And that's because the maximum width in this case is 1920. And it proportionally shrinks it so that the height is only 549 pixels. That actually is correct. If I hit OK and save this image as is, and I'll blow it back up so you can see it. We then have to go under File, Save As, and save a copy as a JPEG. And we can pull this off and rename it. In this case, it might be called Color Print Salon Class in my case. and give it a name, Milky Way Arch underscore Lapkov. And that would give you one way of saving the image in that form. And I would save it at the highest resolution, or 10 or 12, doesn't really matter at that point. But that's the way to create your image at the right resolution. There's another way. So I'm going to go back into Photoshop, go back to history, and go back to open, which is the original size of the image, and put it back in the center. And this is basically reverted back to the very beginning. The other way to do this is to use the export function, and you can use export as. And export as will bring up a little work area where you can then set all these parameters in one fell swoop and do it pretty straightforward. So as this loads, and you're seeing it's taking some time to load because I've got a lot of applications open on my computer, we'll be patient here for a moment. And here we go. So right now the image is 59 megabytes. And what I want to do is I don't want to save it as a PNG file. I want to save it as a JPEG. I want to change the resolution to 1920. It brought it down in this case to 548, which is basically the same thing as before. So now we have 1920 by 548. We don't need any metadata, and we want to convert it to sRGB. And I can then click export, and it will say save it. And I'll just put this on my desktop this time under example exports and rename it CPS for Color Print Salon underscore Milky Way Arch Lapkov. And that is how to convert it, and it will save it, and you're done. And in this instance, it actually does not change the image resolution in the native file. That's still where it was. That's so you can create it and still work on it if needs be. But that's how you do it. We're hoping that you can make our lives a little easier by ensuring that when you do submit images for image competition, that you do resize them properly and name them properly so that the staff behind the scenes who are getting things ready for image competition can do this with minimal work. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Hello, SPCers. This is Steve Lapkov, and I'm going to give you one more example of how to export images out of applications for image competition, this time using Apple's photo application, sometimes called iPhoto, and newer versions it's just called Photos. So what you'll do is you'll find your image that you want to export, and I want to export this image of this butterfly. Actually, I think it might be a moth. In any event, the way you're going to do this is you're going to go under File, and you're going to go to Export, and you're going to have one photo in this case, and you're going to go to the Export menu. Now you want to use a JPEG. You don't want to use TIFF or anything else. You want to use the quality. You want the maximum quality, and then you want to use the most compatible color profile, and then size. This is the important one. You don't want to click on small, medium, large, or full size. You want to click on custom. And the maximum height for an image in our image competitions is 1080 pixels high. Or if it's a long, wide image, it's 1920 images wide. So we're going to go and enter 1080. And then we'll keep the title, the keywords, whatever. And then you will put this, you'll ask it where to go. You'll hit export, and it'll give you a menu of where you want to drop it. I want to drop this on my desktop, and I will hit export. And that's all there is to it. Now, let's say I wanted to use a long and thin image, and let's take this image here, and we'll take this one, and just to really dramatize it, I'll crop this image first. And we'll go to the edit, we will go to the, let's see, crop right here, and we will then crop it so that we have a nice long and thin image. Okay, and then we'll hit enter. Now this image we're going to export as well, and we're going to go File, Export. one image. But remember, 1080, if it's 1080 wide, that may make it too wide. You may blow through the 1920 limit. So we're going to maximize the width, in this case, of 1920. And that will resize the image so it won't get any higher than 1920. And we'll hit export, and again, we'll go to our desktop and we'll export it. Those are the two ways to export from the photo application. You'll have to make sure that you have the height or the width, depending on whether your image is long and thin or tall and narrow, in other words, portrait or landscape, and maximize the dimension based upon whichever dimension is the widest or the highest. And that'll give you the proper dimensions for the photograph. Okay, everybody, that's it for the export. Once it's been exported, you need to rename your images so they're appropriate for our competition. That would include having a 3-letter abbreviation for things like a color print or a black and white print. Color print, if you're in the salon class, would be CPS underscore the image name, followed by another underscore and the maker's name. And that's all there is to it. Make sure your images are named properly and submit them using the judge. We'll see you again next time. If you have any questions, please email me at selphotographer@gmail.com. Thanks.